Russia is not just fighting in Ukraine anymore. It is pushing beyond the battlefield, probing NATO airspace, testing Europe's nerves, and expanding a shadow war that is becoming harder to ignore. As Vladimir Putin tries to sustain a failing invasion, drones are being launched not only toward Ukrainian targets, but into the broader European theater. Some of them are ending up in NATO airspace. And for Eastern Europe, that is no longer being treated as an accident. It is being seen as a warning. Now, after repeated provocations, one message is beginning to emerge from Europe's eastern flank with growing force. Back off, or face a continent that is finally preparing to respond. And one of the countries delivering that message most clearly right now is Bulgaria. On March 7th, reports emerged of yet another suspected Russian drone incursion into European airspace. This time, the concern centered on Sofia. Bulgaria's capital was forced to temporarily shut down Vasilevsky Airport after security systems detected a drone hovering near the airport. Bulgarian authorities moved quickly. Air traffic control and border police coordinated to reroute aircraft and protect everyone on site. The incident was short-lived. The drone was neutralized. While officials remained cautious about publicly identifying its origin, and some speculation even pointed to the possibility of an Iranian drone somehow reaching Bulgarian territory, there is one highly likely source behind the threat. Russia appears to have crossed another line, and Bulgaria is no longer treating this as an isolated event. What happened over Sofia was not a standalone incident. It was part of something much larger, a hybrid war strategy that Russia has been using across Europe for years. The truth is that Russia is already in conflict with Europe, just not through a conventional full-scale invasion beyond Ukraine. Bulgaria is simply one of the latest countries to feel that pressure directly, and its response shows that Sofia understands what is happening. This is not just about one drone. It is about a pattern of escalation. In the aftermath of the incursion, Bulgaria has done far more than temporarily close an airport. It has moved to reinforce its alliances and harden its defenses. Concerned even by the possibility of wider regional involvement, Bulgaria has intensified cooperation with Greece, another NATO state on the Eastern Front that understands the danger of hybrid warfare. Following a direct request from Sofia, Greece will deploy F-16 fighter jets and a Patriot air defense system on its own territory to help guard Bulgarian airspace. Bulgaria has also reaffirmed its support for the Pearl Initiative, under which EU and NATO member states can purchase U.S. weapons for Ukraine's defense against Russia. But Bulgaria's response goes even further than that. Rather than being intimidated, it has chosen to deepen its strategic alignment with Ukraine. On March 30th, Bulgaria announced a 10-year defense deal with Kiev. According to Le Monde, Bulgaria is a major arms manufacturer, and this agreement opens the door to long-term cooperation in the production of drones and other weapons. Joint production is expected to take place on both Bulgarian and Ukrainian territory, according to President Volodymyr Zelensky, and the decade-long duration of the agreement is meant to create a fully systematized defense partnership. That kind of deal sends a powerful signal. It says Bulgaria believes Ukraine will remain sovereign in the long term. And for that to happen, Russia must fail in Ukraine. Putin is now watching a former Soviet-aligned state respond to Russian pressure by moving even closer to the very country Moscow once isolated. Defense companies will coordinate. Governments will cooperate. And instead of dividing Europe, Russia's aggression is helping create new partnerships built explicitly to resist it. That matters, because Europe is facing something far broader than a single violation of Bulgarian airspace. A drone over Sofia is just one symptom of a much larger campaign. In a March 31st report, the Center for European Policy Analysis described what is unfolding across the continent as a shadow war with no obvious end in sight. Europe, it argued, is no longer just witnessing the war in Ukraine from the sidelines. It is now a direct target of a systematic campaign aimed at weakening European institutions, destabilizing societies, and creating internal chaos in the states Russia sees as obstacles to its ambitions. This is not conventional warfare in the classic sense. Russian tanks are not rolling across the rest of Europe. Missiles are not raining down on every NATO capital. Instead, the weapons of this campaign are sabotage, surveillance, cyber attacks, aerial incursions, political manipulation, and covert disruption. These tactics have been building since at least 2022, and Europe is still struggling to adapt to a threat that does not fit neatly into traditional military doctrine. That is part of the problem. Europe's deterrence models generally assume that an adversary will calculate risk, fear punishment, and adjust behavior accordingly. But SEPA argues that Russia does not operate that way. Russian intelligence and security services are rewarded for taking initiative, not showing restraint. Their operations do not always need to achieve major strategic objectives. Often, they simply need to demonstrate action. That creates a dangerous mismatch. Europe is trying to deter a state that is structurally incentivized to escalate. The result is a one-sided, non-traditional conflict in which Russia keeps pushing, and Europe often responds too slowly or through the wrong frameworks. Bulgaria appears to understand that reality. It has seen one example of Russia's strategy firsthand and responded by strengthening its air defenses and deepening military-industrial ties with Ukraine. But Sofia is only confronting one piece of a much bigger system. Russia's shadow war can broadly be broken into four main categories: proxies and infiltration, undersea and energy sabotage, aerial incursions, and cyber operations. Together, these tactics form the architecture of Moscow's campaign across Europe. The first category is proxies and infiltration. Across Europe, Russia has cultivated networks of intermediaries, criminal actors, sympathetic operatives, and covert assets capable of carrying out sabotage, intimidation, surveillance, and destabilization. The advantage for Moscow is obvious. By acting through third parties, it preserves plausible deniability. Incidents occur that clearly serve Russian interests, yet Moscow can claim no formal involvement. That makes traditional deterrence nearly useless. After all, how do you punish an adversary who refuses to fight openly? There is no shortage of examples. Chatham House has pointed to alleged Russian intelligence-linked operatives in the United Kingdom. Germany has arrested individuals suspected of planning attacks on Russia's behalf. Sweden has experienced a string of railway derailments bearing the signs of sabotage. In Estonia, a frontline NATO state, security services have warned of major efforts by Russian actors to recruit local citizens, potentially to build internal networks capable of undermining the state itself. The goal is not random disruption. It is exhaustion. It is confusion. It is division. And it often works. Even now, inside Bulgaria, pro-Russian voices are attacking the country's agreement with Ukraine. Pro-Kremlin parties are expected to use that issue as political ammunition ahead of parliamentary elections scheduled for April 19th. This is how shadow war functions. It strikes infrastructure, airspace, and political systems all at once. It tries to make targeted nations fight among themselves while Russia applies pressure from the outside. That is one reason Russian sabotage operations across Europe reportedly increased fourfold in 2024. The second major front is undersea and energy infrastructure. Russia has increasingly focused on the hidden systems that keep Europe running: cables, pipelines, and maritime energy networks that are vital to civilian life and military coordination alike. This is the kind of strategic pressure point that matters deeply, and it is exactly the kind of power dynamics the Global Brief exists to explain. If you are getting value from this analysis, subscribe to the Global Brief so you do not miss what comes next. SEPA notes that these undersea systems are especially vulnerable because they are both essential and difficult to fully protect. Russia does not need to launch missile strikes against European power plants to create disruption. It can exploit gaps in maritime defenses and interfere with communications, energy transfer, and military logistics below the surface. Suspicious vessels, some Russian and others operating under a civilian appearance, have repeatedly been seen near critical cable networks. By April 7, 2025, at least 2 cases of undersea sabotage had been recorded in the Gulf of Finland over the previous 18 months. The Baltic Sea has seen even more activity. Between 2022 and April 2025, there were 6 suspected sabotage incidents there, and since 2023, 11 undersea cables had been cut or otherwise damaged, according to Politico. Again, the method is carefully calibrated. Eastern European states may know who is behind these acts. But proving direct responsibility to a standard that justifies major retaliation is far more difficult. Russia pushes right up to the edge of open warfare without crossing it cleanly. That ambiguity is one of its most effective weapons. The third category is aerial incursions, and Sofia is only one example. Russia and allied actors have repeatedly sent drones, aircraft, and other aerial assets into or near NATO airspace in ways that appear designed to trigger uncertainty, test readiness, and expose hesitation. The timing of some of these incidents suggests deliberate signaling. Following the announcement of Operation Eastern Sentry on September 12, 2025, after a Russian drone entered Polish airspace, another Russian drone entered Romanian airspace less than 24 hours later. Less than a week after that, 3 Russian MiG-31 fighter jets flew into Estonian airspace and remained there for 12 minutes, ignoring requests for identification until NATO scrambled aircraft to escort them away. Since then, Belarusian weather balloons have drifted over Lithuania, Russian drones have approached the territory of U.S. bases in Estonia, and a growing number of similar provocations have been reported. According to The Conversation, Russian aerial assets tested NATO airspace 18 times in 2025 alone, triple the number recorded in 2024. And then there is the fourth front, cyber warfare. Russian cyber operations have evolved from broad digital disruption into more precise attacks targeting operational systems such as energy grids, transport networks, and strategic infrastructure. At the same time, disinformation remains central to Moscow's approach. By flooding online platforms with bots, coordinated false accounts, and manipulated narratives, Russia seeks to shape public opinion, influence elections, and intensify social polarization in countries far beyond its own borders. There is a deep irony in that strategy. Russia continues to restrict internet freedom at home while exploiting open information systems abroad to project its own agenda. King's College London has highlighted just how expansive this effort has become. Between November 2023 and November 2024, it documented 505 incidents of foreign information manipulation and interference involving 25 platforms, 90 countries, 322 organizations, 38,000 channels, and 68,000 separate pieces of content. Ukraine, Germany, France, and Moldova were among the most heavily targeted. That tells us something important. Russia's cyber war is not only about disabling systems. It is also about shaping perception, distorting reality, and turning democratic societies against themselves. Europe has tried to respond. In December 2025, the European Council sanctioned 2 entities and 12 individuals linked to information manipulation and cyber attacks. Those moves matter, but they still fall short of the scale required. And that is the central weakness Europe faces right now. Russia's actions are often treated not as acts of war, but as criminal acts, maritime accidents, technical disruptions, or isolated security issues. Moscow understands that. It relies on that hesitation. It benefits from the fact that its campaign is often processed through civilian and legal frameworks rather than strategic and military ones. Even on the military side, serious doubts remain about whether Europe and NATO are moving fast enough. Euromaidan Press has reported that Bruno Kohl, former head of Germany's Federal Intelligence Service, warned that Russia may attack a NATO state before the end of the 2020s. Similar warnings have come from Carsten Brewer, the general inspector of the German military. Alarm bells are ringing. Traditional deterrence is not working as intended. Yet some estimates suggest Europe may not be fully ready for a larger confrontation until 2035, potentially years after senior military leaders believe Russia could test NATO directly. That makes what is happening on the eastern flank all the more important. While parts of Europe remain slow to adapt, a number of frontline states are accelerating preparations. Bulgaria is one example. It is turning to Greece and Ukraine for support. According to RFU News, several other European countries are doing the same. Ukraine, after more than 4 years of war, has developed one of the most battle-tested defense ecosystems in Europe, especially in areas such as counter-drone systems, interceptor drones, and electronic warfare. Bulgaria is now positioned to benefit from that expertise. And Bulgaria is not alone. Denmark, Finland, and Latvia have also signed partnerships with Ukraine under the Build for Ukraine initiative. What is emerging is the integration of Ukrainian defense experience into the wider Eastern and Northern European security architecture. Russia's shadow war was supposed to divide Europe. Instead, in some key regions, it is beginning to create a harder, more unified line of resistance. That shift is visible elsewhere too. In Latvia, a NATO battle group anchored by a German brigade is expected to be ready by 2027. Poland has become one of Europe's most serious military powers, spending 4.5% of its GDP on defense in 2025, the highest share in NATO, with 54% of that spending directed toward weapons procurement rather than salaries and maintenance. Lithuania, Latvia, Estonia, and Poland have all invested heavily in border defenses. Greece is reinforcing regional coordination. Bulgaria is moving out of complacency and into preparation. This is the larger significance of what happened in Sofia. The drone itself was a provocation, but the response to it may matter even more. Eastern Europe is no longer waiting for the shadow war to become something bigger before it acts. It is building defenses now. It is aligning more closely with Ukraine now. And it is making clear that intimidation will not produce surrender. Russia may believe that covert pressure, sabotage, cyber attacks, and airspace violations can weaken Europe over time. But the opposite effect may already be taking shape on the eastern flank. Nations that once seemed vulnerable are becoming more coordinated, more alert, and more willing to prepare for the possibility that the shadow war will one day become conventional. Of course, all of this assumes Russia will even retain the military strength needed to make that leap. That is far from guaranteed. Russian forces continue to take severe losses in Ukraine, and the battlefield has become a graveyard for the illusion of easy conquest. Troops are being destroyed at a staggering pace, and every failed offensive weakens the foundation of Putin's wider ambitions. What is happening now is bigger than a single drone over Bulgaria. It is a test of Europe's readiness, NATO's resolve, and Russia's belief that the West will stay confused, divided, and hesitant. Bulgaria's answer is becoming clearer by the day. Prepare, align, strengthen, and resist. And across Eastern Europe, more countries are beginning to speak the same language. If you enjoyed this analysis, subscribe to the Global Brief so you do not miss what comes next.